On yet?
Yeah, we're now live on YouTube.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Audit Committee. My name is Councillor Grant Nurden, and I will be chairing the meeting. We have quite a long agenda, which will be followed by a presentation by the finance team on the preparation of the accounts. So please be prepared for a little bit longer than normal meeting. The first thing I wanted to do after the welcome was to mention that our internal audit manager, Faye, was blessed with a baby boy, Joshua, and he's now 7 weeks old. So if we can ask the Fiona, who's deputising for Faye, if she can pass on our congratulations and well wishes to her. She may even be watching this meeting on YouTube. So from us, all members of the committee, we wish you well for the rest of your maternity leave, and I hope you enjoy the time that you have with Joshua, and of course with your other child. Right, the first item on our agenda is to receive the declarations of interest. Are any members having any interest? And that includes these substitutes as well.
Sorry,
Yes.
Chairman, would you like me to conduct a roll call and members can declare an interest at the same time?
Absolutely, thank you for that. And also, because I've only got the screen with 9 pictures on, please can Leah, if you wouldn't mind, just mention to me if there is anybody who has their hand raised, so that I can bring them in as part of the debate. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Brennan, do you have any interest?
No declarations of interest.
No. Councillor Bullman?
No declarations.
Councillor Holland?
No declarations.
Councillor King?
No interest.
And Councillor Nurden?
No interests, thank you.
And we also have Councillor Catchpole here.
No declarations of interest.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So now we have apologies for absence, if you can do that, James.
Yes, Chairman, we have apologies from Councillor Crouch and Councillor Vincent, and their substitutes are Councillor King and Councillor Brennan.
Super. Thank you very much for that. Right. I have been asked that we change the order on the agenda so that we can bring the draft strategic risk register, because the officers concerned or presenting will be needing to go off to another meeting. So I intend to just go through the minutes and matters arising, and then we will follow that up with agenda item 8. If that's all right with everybody, is anybody got any problem with that? No? I have to flick to your screen. That, okay, excellent. Right, so we will go on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of July. And you will have noticed, well, members would have noticed that I have been circulating corrections to those minutes. James, if you can just mention some of those corrections that differ from the minutes that were circulated with the agenda, the original agenda.
Right, Chairman. There was just 1 or 2 missed words as page 8, as soon as practical. practicable. And there was I think you wanted the, with me? You wanted to have a paragraph rewritten, and I cannot find it now. I think it was highlighted in your versions that was circulated.
These are the amendments that were circulated by Rodney
Oh, those ones. Sorry.
as well. Yes.
Yes. That's the one about the figure of 183,000 surplus there.
That's correct.
Yep. And Rodney confirmed that that was correct. However, the general fund is a statutory surplus, which is £1,047,047 pounds.
£47,000. Yes. So there's
Yeah.
a zero missing
Yeah.
in that second paragraph. So.
Hmm.
Did I circulate all of those, all of Rodney's amendments to the members, or was it just thanking Rodney? Yes. Okay. So I see some nods there. So those corrections. There was just one other thing that I wanted to say before we can confirm these minutes. It was sometime in August that I actually requested that the draft minutes be sent to me so that I can have a look through those. Please, can we ask James and the officers concerned that when we have a meeting, I don't want to have to request the draft minutes in preparation of presenting them to a full council meeting. I would want to have those as soon as possible after the meeting, so that I can go through while things are still fresh in the mind. And as I say, I don't want to have to ask for those. Please, as a matter of course, can they be sent to me?
Chairman, can I just come in
Yes.
on that? What I've asked the committee team to do, we've had this request from quite a few Broadland chairmen, and it's something that we're now building into the process. So as draft minutes are written, they will be circulated to you as soon as is possible and ahead of the agenda being issued.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you. Right, so with those amendments, can we then approve the minutes of the meeting of the 16th of July? And if you can just raise your hand to show that you accept that, and David King, of course, as well, if you can just indicate by voice.
I wasn't at the last meeting, so I can't put my hand up, unfortunately.
Okay, so what we will do is you will be abstaining.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
That was
Right.
unanimous as well.
Super. Thank you. Right. The next item on the agenda, of course, is going to be matters arising. And I have a few items there. The first one is on, and I need to have these on, it's on page 8. Item 42, we talk about the risk management and cybercrime online training. If you can just give us an update on what the progress has been with regards to that being arranged as soon as practicable.
Chairman, I can pick that query up for you. In terms of the cybersecurity training, well, broadly speaking, we have an e-learning platform called SkillsGate, which has just been finalised, and you have your own member area for that. And in there will be the cybersecurity training, risk training, some safeguarding training. So I just need to test all of that through, make sure that works well, and then look out for some emails coming your way in terms of how to use that system and the training that will be available for you.
Okay, excellent, because I see that's also mentioned in the last paragraph of the minute number 49, which is on page, let me get to it, it's on page 17. It was also requested that risk management should reference training for members as well as staff. So we will see that it's not just for cybercrime, but it's also for the risk management.
That's correct, Chairman.
Super, thank you. Also, still on that agenda item 42, there was I requested any feedback regarding the briefing on Broadland growth to be provided to the committee. Have we got any feedback at all from that Broadland growth limited presentation? That was done to all members, not just to the committee. Debbie?
I haven't had any feedback personally, apart from a few people to say thank you for it. They found it informative, but I haven't heard anything since, Councillor Grant.
Okay. Right, so that's that one. Then with regards to the purchase orders issue, we will address that under agenda item number 6. Then we go to, on of course, page 9. Minute number 9, the annual, just looking here at the external audit plan fee. Any increase in the fee was likely to be quite small. However, in respect of fee levels, generally Norfolk local authorities had collectively written to the public sector audit appointments to challenge EY's proposal to increase fees substantially. Rodney, do you have any feedback, or Debbie, do you have any feedback on the fees?
So we're still awaiting a resolution of this matter. We have gone back to EY again on this, but we haven't got a resolution as to the agreed audit fee as yet.
Okay. And the annual fraud update, we would talk there was mention there that a new fraud officer has recently taken place, and the reviewing of the policies will be done as one of his or her first tasks. Has that appointment taken place?
It has indeed. Ian Kerrison is now our fraud officer. He has actually drafted our anti-fraud policy, and it's just sitting waiting for review, so that should be coming to members fairly soon.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. Right, do any other members have any matters arising that they wish to raise in the last set of minutes?
Nobody's indicating so.
Okay, super. So, Rodney, when we have our next meeting in November, all those issues that were raised with regards to the draft accounts, we will be able to raise those as matters arising at that meeting?
That is correct. We are still on track to give you a final set of accounts for sign off for our BDC November audit committee meeting. It is fair to say we are having challenges just signing off the final bits, very much related to COVID. It is more difficult doing the audits sort of online, but actually we are still working hard to make sure we can achieve those deadlines. Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Rodney. Right. There's nothing else under matters arising, so we can then go on to agenda item number 8, and that's over to Hannah and Sinead.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'm going to briefly introduce and then hand over to Sinead. So as the committee will be aware, following the extensive work of the committee in developing the new risk policy for the council, it was adopted and agreed by Cabinet in September this year. Work has then been underway in developing the strategic risk register that sits alongside the risk policy, and has been brought to Audit Committee today for review before it forms part of the regular quarterly performance reporting into ONS and Cabinet. So significant work has taken place by directors and assistant directors to identify the strategic risks to sit as part of this register. And Sinead's going to talk a little bit through around how we've got to where we've got to, what you've got in front of you today. And we've also got a number of the directors in the room to answer any questions on those risks that have been identified, if you have any. So over to Sinead this morning.
Thanks, Hannah. So just to give you a bit of a background and context to the Strategic Risk Register and the report that you've got in front of you. So as Hannah said, Audit Committee worked really hard on the risk management policy, and that went through Cabinet in September for agreement. So just to give some context to the risk management policy itself. So the policy sets out the processes and procedures for how we identify and manage all types of risks to the organisation. So the policy itself sets out that risks should be managed organisationally through a series of risk registers. And these are broken down into three main categories of risks. So the first is strategic risks, which is what we're here to talk about today. And then I'll talk a little bit through in a sec around how we got to the point that we have. The second is directorate, or what we call operational risks. So these are risks that are managed by directorates and by teams themselves. And then we've got project risks again, and as it says, that they are risks that are managed through projects. So the policy itself outlines the roles and accountabilities for managing and identifying risks across the council. So in terms of large scale risks, or strategic risks as we call them, these are risks that are large scale in terms of the impact they could have on the council in terms of delivering against the ambitions set out in our delivery plan. These are identified and managed by CMLT. So in terms of the roles and responsibilities of members, so as you'll know, Cabinet has the overall responsibility for setting the risk culture, approving the risk management policy, and also developing the risk appetite for the council. Cabinet is there to receive quarterly updates as part of the performance, risk and finance reports, which we take through in Q2, 3 and 4. And these provide an update on the progress of the actions on those risks. Audit has a delegated responsibility for scrutinising the scope and the effectiveness of the systems that we've got in place to manage those risks. So as Hannah said, work has been underway with CMLT to identify what those big strategic risks are that are faced by the council and could impact on us in delivering our delivery plan. Operational risks, as I said, are managed by the directorates. They can be escalated through to the strategic risk register if they become large enough in terms of the impact and not manageable at a directorate level. So just because there aren't risks on the strategic risk register that you might expect to see, it doesn't mean that they aren't a risk. It just means that they're within our risk appetite. So we don't need to manage them at that strategic level. So the report you've got in front of you has that draft register for you to review. As you can see, each of those risks are linked to one of our corporate priority areas. An auditor are asked to review and note the proposed risk register that you've got in front of you before it goes on formally through to Cabinets as part of the Q3 reports. And I'll pause there for any questions.
Thanks, Sinead. Just a couple of questions with regards to the risk register that I have. Firstly, that we look at there are 4 strategic areas in the plan, and you have identified 11 risks that are quite relevant to the strategic direction, the strategic ambitions of the council. There are 2 that relate to, let me just see, basically supporting individuals and empowering communities. And you have identified 9 that relate to moving with the times, working smartly and collaboratively. And I'm a little concerned that we haven't identified any risks that are significant in the other 2 areas, which is to do with growing the economy and the environment aspects. Now, if I look at some of the risks that you talk about with regards to moving with the times. You talk about local government reform and devolution, which pretty much is out of our hands, and changes to the external environment, such as political changes and the national priorities from central government, which to me seem far more remote than issues such as for the environment. Will we manage to achieve our goals of carbon neutrality or whatever it is by 2025, or whatever it is that is in our strategic environmental register? I would like to be able to say that this is a balanced register, but I can't, because I don't see anything in the areas of growing the economy and the environment. So that was the one question that I have. The other is that I would have liked to have seen some sort of comments under the comments and progress on actions. If we look at this register on pages 57 through to 61, we see quite a few delivery timescales where there is something that is actually ongoing. And this schedule, I know it's a draft schedule, but it does say comments and progress will be updated for Q3 only. If we were looking at this, it I would have found it very helpful to have, if something is ongoing, that we have at least some sort of a comment under that, so that we can see that this register, when it does come to us to go to ONS and to Cabinet, that we can see, yes, this is how we would like to have things put into the last column. So those are just my thoughts on it, and I would welcome any of the other members' thoughts on this register. Nigel?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Is it possible that we could just have some sort of understanding of where these levels, where it comes under likelihood, impact, severity score, what these actually mean in reality? Get a bit more information on that, please.
Yeah, so that scoring system has come from the risk management policy. So if you refer back to the risk management policy that was agreed in Cabinet, those scoring systems are outlined in detail there.
Okay, so that original one that we had, just to make the risk matrix, is what you're referring back to, is that correct?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
It is, okay, because this does seem a little complicated compared to that original risk matrix. And then, as Grant has already said, then there appear to be omissions as well with regard to certain areas like economy and environment as well. Anyway, okay, that's fine for now. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Hannah, you want to come in?
Chairman, would you like me to come in on the points that you raised to start with? Would that be helpful?
Absolutely, yes, please.
So I'm looking at my scribbles here, so tell me if I've missed something. I think that the first point was around which risks linked to the strategic areas within the delivery plan. And so as we outlined earlier, in terms of this strategic risk register, it's been developed around those risks which have that highest impact on the organisation. That's not to say that there aren't risks in those other key strategic priority areas, but in terms of the review that has been done by the directors and ADs at this point, they're felt to be able to be managed as part of that directorate risk register and directorate oversight of those key risks, rather than at this point needing to form as part of the higher level strategic risk register. This is obviously an evolving beast in terms of what is on the risk register, and if there is a need at a certain point for risk to be escalated to be monitored at the strategic level, we will of course do so. So it may be that risks are added or potentially taken away as things change or evolve. Picking up your next point around local government reform and devolution, so the rationale for including that on here at this stage, obviously there was a lot of coverage nationally around potential proposals coming forward from central government around a white paper, which we now know has been delayed potentially until the new year. But in terms of the impact on the council and the way that the council worked, it was deemed to be severe in terms of its potential impact, and so that's why it was included as part of this register. In terms of including comments and actions at this stage, as it is the draft register before we take it into a more formal setting, we felt it was better to bring in to you for overview and feedback in terms of what risks have been captured to date, and then absolutely from Q3 we will be updating in terms of progress or issues or the support that's been put in place to mitigate against those risks identified. So we'll be picking that up as Q3.
Thanks, Hannah. I think I am aware that Phil Courtier is at the meeting. And I am, as I say, a little concerned about things that are strategically of a higher priority with regards to the environment than the issues to do with devolution or changes in politics. And even if those risks are if I would like to have Phil's comments on why he thinks that those risks that are relevant to the strategic aims and ambitions of this council, why they are not in the strategic risk register that we have before us. Phil, if you would like to comment, please do.
Yeah, very happy to. My internet connection is fairly unstable at the moment, so my apologies if the connection isn't good. In terms of, I suppose I'd like to explore with you, Chairman, what is it that you would see as a risk? And I'm not meaning that flippantly, because we recognise that climate change, environmental issues are posing a huge global threat. But I suppose it's, where does Broadland own that risk that we would then have it on the strategic risk register? Is it the impact of climate change upon us? Is it, yeah, I suppose I just want to understand a little bit more about where you'd see that on the risk register. Just to remind members as well, clearly we have now an environmental strategy. We have someone who's come in to just scope out the implementation and delivery of that. Part of that will be setting baseline measures so we can measure our success in delivering that environmental strategy. So I suppose I'm just trying to understand where you see the risk register interfacing with those things.
Right. Okay, Phil, thank you for that. We did catch, I think, most of what you were saying there. If I was to consider what is the risk of us not achieving our environmental goals or targets by 2025, which I understand is in the strategic plan that has been put together, I would suggest that there is the impact on the council and its reputation, etc., is for me a very high risk if we do not achieve, or if we do not stick within our strategic aim and goal of getting to where we want to be on that strategic program. So that's the one aspect to do with thing. And my honest opinion is I believe that is reputationally more damaging to the council, especially with what's going on in the environment at the moment. That to me is more of an issue than political changes and the impact of political changes on in the council. We talk about the impact of COVID, and this brings me to the other aspect which is in your remit, and that's to grow the economy. And I see that we have risks under supporting individuals and empowering communities, but what happens if this COVID pandemic and second wave and all the rest of us crashes the economy in Broadland? Is that not also a risk that we need to have something in, so that, in my opinion, I don't see this as a very balanced risk register. I just see it as dealing with collaboration and issues to do with the impact of COVID. So I want to see if we've got a strategic risk register, I want to know what are the strategic risks that we face under the environment, and I want to be able to see whether we are able to mitigate. How high are those? What is the likelihood? What is going to be the impact? And that's what I would like to see in this risk register. Even if we have got it down to a mitigated risk level, I want to see it in this risk register so that it is balanced across all of our four strategic ambitions, direction, aims, whatever. And I hope that comes across in the way that, as I'm saying, I want a balanced risk register, not just one that focuses on collaboration and this other one, which is the supporting individuals. We need to have it more balanced across the full spectrum of where our strategic direction is going. So I hope that clarifies it a little bit more for you, Phil. And I see that Councillor King also wants to come in. So, David? We can't hear you, David, if you are...
So sorry, my iPad has just changed the format into some sort of I don't know what to call it. It looks like more like hieroglyphics than actually does words. So I've lost the agenda. But what my question is that one of the points that you were making about the risks that we're actually looking at is when you actually look at the risk register on the right hand side, it says the current risk, and then it says within risk appetite, and there are several of them. Number 1, I think it's number 3, number 4, and moving down it says within the risk appetite, and the answers are no. So if we have risks that aren't within the appetite, I don't see what measures are actually in place to actually get them within the appetite.
That's a good question, David. Hannah? Or Sinead, sorry.
To Mano's point, and then Sinead can come in after if it need be. So in terms of what's been identified, that is why it would feature on the strategic risk register, because of the level of the risk identified within the risk register itself, we've included all the mitigating actions that are being taken place in order to minimise the impact on the council, and that is what we will be updating on as part of that quarterly reporting, so that members are aware in terms of all the actions that are being taken to minimise the risk as much as possible. But as the chairman identified earlier in the meeting, there are things that are beyond our control, and what we can do is put mitigating actions in place as much as possible to manage those risks. I don't know if Sinead wants to come in any further on that point, if that's covered it.
Councillor Borman has a question.
Okay, Peter, if you'd like to go in.
Yes, a little more specific. In terms of risks, obviously, historical issues like the Eco Cube come to mind, and I'm just wondering if the food hub, where that actually features in the risk register, because I was struggling somewhat to find it under the generic terms that seem to be listed.
Hannah or Sinead?
I think Phil's indicating that he wants to come in on that point.
Okay, over to you, Phil.
Or Chairman, will you, if I can intervene at this point?
Phil, do you want to turn your video off?
Yes, it's a very good point. And we are, the Food Innovation Centre is one. It's a key high-profile project that we are. Yeah.
We're losing you, Phil. Sorry.
Is that better? I'll carry on trying, and then if it doesn't work, I'll perhaps try and put some comments in.
That sounds a lot better, though. Yeah.
So the Food Innovation Centre is a key project that we are delivering, but it's not the only project we are delivering. And we've actually got a consultant. Can you hear me any better now? Okay.
Yes, you do.
Right, I'll try again. My apologies.
Yeah.
So the Food Innovation Centre is a key project that we are delivering at the moment, but it's not the only project. And we recognise that there are absolutely key lessons to learn from the. Yeah. Chairman, do you want me to give you a written response?
I think that would be helpful, because my thoughts are that yes, that would fall under the area of growing the economy, and what are the risks involved in that, and because that is such to me that's more of an issue, and Peter's right to have raised it. It's more of an issue than political changes. And I would like to see, under your remit, strategic risks and how they will impact if they are not delivered or if they are not implemented. So under those two sectors, growing the economy and the environment, my opinion is that there needs to be a balance. We can't have 2 in one sector and 9 risks in another sector. We need to have as a balance, so that I feel that this risk register reflects the strategic direction and ambitions of the full spectrum of the council, not just collaboration and supporting individuals. Those are my thoughts. So if you would like to, because it's an impact on your remit, if you would like to work with Hannah and Sinead on bringing and identifying, because it's not just the operational issues that we want to that we think that there are risks in. There are risks in, are we going to be able to achieve that? What risks can impact negatively on us achieving those ambitions? So if you wouldn't mind getting together with the team and having another look at this, and then possibly we can have another look at it before as part of the November Audit Committee meeting.
Councillor Bullman has his hand raised again.
Yeah. And then Hannah would also like to
I agree with you entirely. The problem I'm finding with this document is it's very generic, and some of our risks are very specific, and I'm not sure that we have sufficient detail here to be able to assess the level of risk against some of our key projects. So I'd like to see more detail so we can understand particularly where the risks lie and particularly what we're going to do to overcome them. But at the moment, the document to me is too generic.
And also another point which was raised by Councillor King, and that is that, it says here that is it within the risk appetite or is it not? And what are we going to be doing to get it within the risk appetite? And there's a lot of things that are not within the risk appetite. Are we really concerned about political changes or devolution, which is could happen? I'm more concerned about the environment and us achieving our goals by the timeframes that we have set, rather than as I say, political changes. I see a number of hands have gone up. Nigel?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just going back to my original question and reference to the risk register which was presented to us previously. I don't know if you can see, well, it's not shown up very well. However, I have it here in front of me. And this is one that you and I have discussed briefly previously, Chair, about the possible categories. But this strategic risk register, which was Appendix C when it was presented, it goes into financial loss, service provision, projects, objectives, health and safety, staff engagement, reputational, and statutory and legal. And yet none of those really appear to have been transferred across to what is now being presented to us as the draft strategic risk register, which, as somebody else has commented, appears to be very much just about the working collaboratively and not addressing these other issues, which then leads back to what you were saying, Chair.
Right. I also saw Hannah and Debbie. So Hannah, would you like to go?
Thank you, Chairman. Mine was on the previous point, just picking up Phil's comments in the chat. I think it comes back to the point that we've been talking through earlier in the meeting around the level at which these strategic risks are monitored. So in terms of the projects that Phil was referring to, there'll be risks that we monitor as part of that programme management and will be reviewed at a regular basis and therefore considered at a directorate level. It's the level at which things are escalated to the strategic risk register, which is why members may feel that those captured are more at that higher level in terms of the levels of risk that are identified. But as Phil has said in the chat, we can absolutely take the point away around economic growth and environment and just ensure that everything has been captured at the right level for this. I think Debbie or Emma also wanted to come back on the policy itself.
Right, over to Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say a couple of things. One is there will be times when we cannot get the level of the risk into what we think is acceptable, for instance, the finance one. If the government change or do decide when they bring in the changes to the financial landscape in which we work, that until, we can continue to lobby and things like that, but that will be completely outside our immediate control. And so there are times when we won't be able to bring that, or however much we mitigate, into a yes rather than a no in that column there. So I just think, you know, we just need to accept that we can do our best, we can put as much mitigations in, but sometimes it is completely outside our control. And the second thing is that this is dynamic. So as risks come on, and there will be ones that come on and there will be ones that will fall off. So very much the FIC, for instance, we will look at that. At the moment, we're in the elementary stages. We'll be looking at the risks around delivery, around the financial, you know, can we deliver in budget? Will we deliver on time? Will the standard of the building be acceptable? And will it be rented out, for instance? Those type of risks around that. Obviously, if we think they're manageable and they're okay, it's only when they become an issue that we think they're not going to be met would they then come onto the strategic risk register. So very much things will come on and they will also fall off as we think the risk, you know, risk element changes there, the risk scoring.
All right, just looking at that, at the risk register that we've got in front of us, we've got some items that are pink, some that are yellow, some that are amber, some that are red, but I don't see any green. So I don't know what this color coding has got, is going to indicate to us. But if something is within our appetite, I would like to know that. Okay, if one of our strategic goals is to achieve carbon neutrality by a particular date, and it is within our appetite and it is being managed to an acceptable level, I want to know that. I want to be able to see that from the strategic risk register. I want to know how we're doing on mitigating our risks. Okay, and that's the kind of work that I would like to see in this risk register. If there is something that is not, because as Councillor King mentioned, there are some no items in that last column. What are we doing about it? And that is why the comments column, as I say, it is a draft, but I still believe that if you've got to know it, I want to know why you've said no and what are you doing about it? And so that's one aspect of this draft risk register that I would want to see more information about before saying, yes, okay, this is how you've done it, is how we want it to be done. The other thing is what Councillor Brennan was saying, where do we see these things in relation to that matrix that we were given? Is it going to be an appendix so that we can see, well, okay, that's why it gave it a 4 because it is, or a 3 because it is. So yes, it is a brilliant start. My thoughts are of where we want to go with this strategic risk register. So
Chairman,
I seem to remember Emma was also wanting to come in.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Chairman. Just a couple of points, just referring back to, and Jamie, to rest your hand. I'll let the Chairman know you want to speak next. You can rest your hand. In terms of the comments that were made regarding that grid where we had the social impact, the financial impact, that grid that you agreed as a committee was there for officers to be able to look at risks and then work out at what level the risk needs to be plotted to onto the risk register. So you wouldn't necessarily see that come through here, but that's so that you're aware of as a committee how we've come to the likelihood and impact. So from memory, anything that was over £500,000, put it right up in that kind of top right hand corner there. So that's what that's the tool, if you like, that the officers use to assess the risk. There's a couple of points I just wanted to make, kind of reflecting back, listening to this. almost kind of putting my old head of internal audit hat on, I think what we need to make sure with you as an audit committee is that you are really focused and cognizant of the strategic risks. And it's really interesting in terms of listening to the conversation that you're having, because you've obviously looked back to the delivery plan and can see how this needs to link into the delivery plan. And you've commented that there's a couple of areas in the delivery plan that aren't on the risk register. That's not wrong. That, you know, that isn't unusual not to see that, because actually what has been determined is there may well be risks in that area, but they're being managed and mitigated at an operational level, therefore would not be escalated up into the strategic risk register. So that is very much for officers to manage. They will escalate up as they feel necessary. As we've heard today, there's some questions that have been raised, which was within your remit to do as an audit committee, in terms of where are we with the FIC, what are the risks within that. That's being managed at an operational level. If that starts to tip into a strategic, then that will be escalated up, and the committee will get the awareness of that risk through that. So I think part of it is recognising, the officers, and provide, we are giving you assurance that what are real big strategic risks that as a committee you need to be focused on and have an awareness of are what you've got in front of you. And just then on the last point that you were talking about, what about those that have been mitigated and are within the risk appetite? Some councils, and we would need to check this through with Cabinet, because ultimately this is their risk register. Some councils do put in those that have been mitigated and provide a summary. Others don't, because they believe they've been mitigated and actually want the committees to focus on that. But I think that's a comment we can take back to discuss with Cabinet as to whether they want to kind of include that in here or not. So I'm hoping that's given a bit of a kind of a summary as to where we were, where we're going, and how that's going to link through, Chairman.
Okay, thanks, Emma. Any comments from other members?
Councillor Holland's got a hand raised.
Yes, sir.
Hello, yeah, I just wanted to clarify. Can you hear me all right? Sorry. I just wanted to clarify, it seemed to me that what we've got in this risk register are things that are serious and strategic risks. I'm assuming that somewhere there is another document that you are all managing risks which you consider you have under control and so on and so forth, and that you are matching those to our plan. Would I be correct in saying that? Which presumably I had assumed is why they don't appear, some of those things don't appear on this document. Is that what we're saying?
Absolutely correct, Councillor Holland.
Thank you.
Tom.
Jamie, you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I guess I was going to say similar stuff that Emma just did, but it's maybe worth just building upon what she said, because I think it was really sensible. I think there's something in this conversation about, and do you know what, it's been really helpful to listen, and I do think there is definitely some worthwhile activity around looking at some of those economic and environmental areas, and give a better sense of weight. And clearly this is your risk register. This is the risk register you hold as a committee and up to Cabinet on behalf of the council. So it needs to represent those areas that you feel hold the greatest risk on behalf of you and your residents. I think there's something about delineating, as Emma was just saying, between an objective and a risk. And that was the point Emma was making about the delivery plan, the various strategies we have around agendas that are held dear by the council and in the Conservatives manifesto as the administrative party. So having the content and a very clear mandate around the environmental strategy, for example, is something that Phil and his team have done an awful lot of work with councillors to get laid out in black and white, and gives a very strong direction of travel for the council and for the officer team, against which you would quite rightly hold us to account, is different to saying there's a risk of not achieving it. And I just wanted to draw that delineation, because there are multiple points around the governance infrastructure we have as a council around where we can have those discussions and can be held to account as officers, be that through policy committees that have the remit for such agendas, or more informally with portfolio holder briefings, or in the role of scrutiny as well. And just to highlight that, there's an example that I know my guys are working on under the environmental strategy, which is the admirable and ambitious target to achieve 60% recycling by 2025. And we're currently at about high 40s, early 50s. Clearly, there is a risk we won't achieve that. And that's probably worth acknowledging. It will sit on a risk register somewhere, as Councillor Holland points out. It will sit on a risk register down at an operational level. However, from my point of view, There is some really good work going on at present between the officer team who are responsible for recycling with the policy committee informally to look at the various different levers we hold as a council that we could start to explore that might help get us towards that 60% rate. So at such time, I think, given the right level of collaboration between officers and councillors and our ability to take some bold decisions, there's a reasonable chance we will hit that 60% recycling rate. Therefore, it's not a risk that I'm unduly concerned about and wouldn't feel the need to report upwards. But it is a risk. It's just about proportionality and levels of reporting. If I might, Chair, the other point I was going to make is that, and I think Sinead said it right at the beginning, this is a strategic risk register. I recognise the points made about some of those things on this register feel quite disparate, distant to the council, out of our control. I think when we think about something like local government review, it as a single agenda item has probably got the greatest potential of anything on that list to make the biggest difference to our residents, by virtue of the fact that the government is looking at local government review in the same breath as devolution, and a deal around devolution could make the biggest difference to our economic and environmental well-being as a county and as a district in the longer term. It is absolutely a risk we must be cognizant of and take heed of, not something that we necessarily have as much control over as we would like, but we are not completely passive to the agenda either. It really does feel like something we should be talking about at this policy committee and at cabinet level, by virtue of it being on the risk register. So I just wanted to kind of extract those parts of the conversation as I've heard them, and hopefully those comments have been helpful.
Yeah, no, I totally understand what you're saying, Jamie. The concern that I have is that I understand what operational risks are when it comes to getting the recycling rate up to whatever it is. To me, that is not a strategic thing. But what our strategic goals are with regards to the environment is what is the overarching ambition, and what could impact, what are the risks that could impact on this council achieving those goals. You talked about the local government review and its impact on on our residents. I don't see that, if I'm being quite honest, I don't see that being that huge an impact on our residents, in that services are still going to be delivered, but they're going to be delivered by a different organization or a different organizational structure. So I don't see that as having a greater impact on our residents or community as us not being able to manage things or risks that impact on our economy in this region collapsing, or us not achieving that that goal of reducing carbon emissions by a certain period of time. To me, those are strategic, and those should be on the, I'm not talking about operational, I'm talking about those strategic goals that this council holds dear. And it's not party manifesto or anything like that. It is what we have got as our strategic ambitions, and that's that strategic plan that's got those 4 areas. And I would want to see in a strategic risk register all 4 of those fairly well balanced, but not where we've only got 2 in one area and 9 in collaboration in that area. So that's what I would like to see from this register, even if we have got to this point where the strategic risk is being mitigated. Sue, you want to come in again?
Yeah, thank you. this is, I think I agree with you, Grant. What I can't quite understand is if we have got them somewhere and they are strategic risks and they are relevant to various elements of our plan, it would be useful to be able to see them on this document. Clearly, I appreciate that some of them are possibly mitigated, but nevertheless, that would actually also be useful to see in comparison to other issues. So I kind of agree with Grant on this one.
Yeah. Anybody else? Any other members got any thoughts on that? Peter, you look pensive.
I agree with what you said, basically.
Oh, okay. Nigel?
I think what we need to do is to look at this document again, because it doesn't, I think, fulfill many of our aspirations in terms of what we should be doing in terms of assessing risk, identifying risk, and making sure it's properly prioritized. It's all a bit too vague for me, to be honest.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Nigel, any comments you want to make?
Sue Catchpole had a hand up before, so do you want to take her first?
Absolutely, Sue.
Thank you, Chair. Newly coming into this, I'm wondering where it's being defined, how we gauge risk. I heard reference to something that's going to impact over £500,000, but how are we gauging the non-quantitative measures? And basically, is it a decision for the elected councillors to get our heads together and decide what, or to suggest what we think the risks are, or is it for the paid staff to come up with those? That would be my basic fundamental question.
Okay, thanks, Sue. I saw Emma's hand raised up, and then Hannah. So
probably going to say the same as Hannah. So in terms of where I talked about so how are these risks got to, and I gave the example of over £500,000 in the risk policy that has been signed off by Cabinet. That is all of their sets, the framework around by which risks are developed and documented, and that came through the audit committee prior to going on to Cabinet. So so I can share that again with you if you need to see a copy of that. And then in terms of whose responsibility is the risks, the policy is quite clear in terms of the senior management team develop those risks, put those risks together, and it's for Cabinet as the authority there to endorse and take those risks forward. That's a Cabinet role. As an audit committee, you're here to have that critical eye over what those risks are.
Thanks, Emma. Hannah, did you want to add to that in any way?
Emma rightly covered many of the points I was going to make. The only thing I was going to also bring into the mix, just picking up the comments from other councillors about the level of depth of what's included. So just as a reminder, this will feature as part of the quarterly reporting that goes through to ONS and to Cabinet, which will include quite detailed finance overview, but also the performance measures. And if I take performance measures as an example, there's around, I'm going to look to Sinead out to nod or shake her head, but around 20 odd performance measures that are featured within that report. Those are the only performance measures that are reviewed or considered across the council. Like with risk, there are performance measures that are at an operational or a directorate level that are regularly reviewed by teams, and it's those that are at that strategic level that are included within the report that goes through on a quarterly basis. Logic that is and in line with the policy that was agreed through Cabinet. That is why this number and this level of risk is included, and that next level, the same with performance measures, is reviewed at an operational or at a directorate level. So just for context in terms of how this fits into the broader reporting mechanism, we'll go through quarters.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. The performance issues, that's operational. So we're not really concerned at the strategic level about performance. That's, as I say, purely operational. Sinead, I presume now we've we've got to the point now where we've discussed this at length.
Sorry, Chairman. Councillor King had another question.
Oh, okay. David, if you'd like to put your question.
Thank you very much. Now, my question is that is it possible to actually get copies of the other risk registers that the council does possess, just for context of what we're actually looking at? Because we're discussing things, and we're being told context, we're being told other areas, we're being told it's being dealt with by the directorates, but we can't actually see them. So it would be very helpful for me personally if I could actually see those other risk registers, so that I actually know how this fits in with all those other parts.
Thanks, David. So yes, Sinead, we feel as a committee that there needs to be a little bit more work to be done on this strategic risk register, looking at those 4 areas of the strategy. Would you think it's reasonable to be able to bring it to our November committee meeting so that we can have another look at it before finally saying, yes, thank you, that's very acceptable to us?
Yes, yes, Chair, we can have a look to update and bring to the November meeting.
Okay, super. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. Does anybody want to take a five-minute break just to get some refreshments before we go on to the next item? I see Nigel saying yes, so if we can just have 5 minutes, and if I can remind members to turn the screens off, we'll be back at 10 past.
And on mute, please, as well, members. Thank you.
Yes. Right, I'm back. As soon as I see people starting to turn their videos on, I'll be able to carry on. Right, Peter, we're waiting for. Rodney, we're waiting for. Emma, Debbie, who else? Nigel, and Sue. Right, I can't carry on unless they're there because it's going to be over to Fiona next to present her agenda item 5, which is to do with the progress report from internal audit. So we're still waiting for people to arrive back. Right, we've got Sue back. We've got Nigel back. Debbie's back. Peter. Peter, Rodney, and Emma we're waiting for. Rodney, welcome back. There's Peter and Emma. Right, it's now 7 minutes of break. I did say 5 minutes. Right, Peter's back. Now we're just waiting for Emma. Our monitoring officer. Who has to monitor everything that we do and say. Right, I don't know whether there's a problem. Is if somebody's able to contact Emma and just find out why she is not being able to join us again.
I'll check for you, Chair.
Thanks, Debbie. Debbie, have you had any joy, and are you able to deputise for her as?
I think we should carry on, Chair. I've texted her, but I haven't had a response.
Okay. Right. Oh, there she is now. She's back again. Right, so we can now move on to the progress report on internal audit, and I'd like to first welcome Fiona, who's deputising for Faye. Welcome, and please can you proceed to present the report?
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, in Faye's absence, so in terms of the progress report, this is a fairly light progress report in terms of the actual delivery, and I'll come on to that in a second. As you can see within section 2, we've got the movement from previous reporting. This is around the movement of 2 audits between quarters, so there's no significant changes in terms of having our audits removed or added to the plan. What I'd like to point out is just in sections 4 and 5, whilst we haven't got any reports coming through as final reports, this information is retained in there for information. So as reports are finalised in future reports, the information will continue to be there in a consistent way. The part I would like to draw attention to is Appendix 1, which is the progress against the plan. As you can see, in terms of progress, quarter 2 is very light with 1 audit. This was around the assurance mapping. As we are in progress, and we've moved on quite a bit from the assurance mapping in terms of 4 days, that's almost complete. In terms of timing of this audit, the assurance mapping involved a number of questionnaires going out to officers that needed to be collated to identify if there's any particular risks in those areas that needed to be considered for the inclusion in the internal audit plan. So in terms of what we want to achieve with assurance mapping, is there's 3 potential outcomes. This could be that we've identified from an area from management assurances that no internal audit work is required around this area. We've identified that we've already got an internal audit in plan for this year, and there's other risks that need to be considered that have been drawn out of the assurance mapping that needs to be considered within those audits. And the third one is more the most significant outcome. Is there something that's coming out of our assurance mapping that needs to be considered for an audit to be included in the audit plan? If there is something that's coming out of that, that will come back to your attention so that you can make that decision. Where we are also with the assurance mapping, we're doing this across the consortium, so we can identify if there's any risks that are coming out from one of the other organisations that needs to be considered here, and the same vice versa. And what we want to achieve from that is there something that's going on in one of the other councils that really does need to be considered in the others? So in order for that work to be completed, it's around timing to make sure that all of the assurance mapping can be completed and concluded at the same time. We are now reaching the conclusion stage, so we will be able to report at that at the next meeting. In terms of the rest of as you can see, with quarter 3 and quarter 4 are quite heavy with the audits. We have already made progress on the quarter 3 plan, and we've got 2 audits already in progress. That's the council tax and the payroll and human resources. We have allocated resources for the rest of the year, and we have already scheduled a lot of those audits in. So quarter 3 is already scheduled and work is underway. Quarter 4 resources have been assigned to make sure that we can actually deliver the plan by the end of the year. I need to make the caveat that, especially with the pandemic, you never know what's around the corner, what could happen. But as things currently stand, with the resources we have in place, the contact and communication arrangements we have with officers to make sure that we can work remotely, to make sure that we can have the information that we need delivered in a secure and safe way. We do have everything in place to deliver that plan by the end of March. Perhaps if there's any comments?
Yes, thank you, Fiona. First thing I just wanted to point out in the report, it does make in paragraph 2 where it says significant changes to the approved internal audit plan. Sorry for Sue, that is on page 22 of the papers. It makes reference to at the request of the committee, and then under the first audit it says at the request of the committee, and then the second one says the committee requested. And what I would like to make sure that happens in the future is that if those statements are being made, that we actually do see in the minutes reflected that the committee requested that those audits be changed or put in elsewhere on the in the papers.
Chairman,
So,
just on that, as I said yesterday, I will feed back to the team and make sure that we cover that off. Absolutely no problem at all.
okay, well, I'm just, these are points that although we did mention in the pre-meeting yesterday, I just need to make sure that other members are aware of the issues that were raised yesterday. And by the way, welcome to Trevor. Thank you for joining us. Right.
I would like to point out sorry, can I just add in terms of those particular audits, where an audit is requested in terms of the timing by the audit committee, which absolutely we would always seek to achieve. The one caveat I would add to that is we would need to make sure the timing of a particular, not say for these particular audits, but any audits that move between quarter request, we also need to make sure that it times well for the officers in terms of there are no particular system updates or changes to the system that would impact on the best timing to achieve the most value out of that particular audit. That's what I wanted to add, just in terms of timing of things. Sometimes things do move because it's more relevant for us to be able to add value by doing the audit at a certain point in time.
Absolutely excellent. Thank you, Fiona. Going on to the second point, and that's the paragraph 3.2. In summary, 4 days of programmed work has now been completed. And that's between the period 7th of July to 12th of October. Only 4 days work has been completed. I was a little concerned, I am a little concerned, that if you had 8 days of work programmed in, and you only managed to achieve in the quarter 50%, how comfortable can we feel? How reassured can we feel that the majority of work, which is in the revised plan in quarters 3 and quarters 4 is achievable? And yeah, and if you only manage to achieve 50%, because you were given a goal of achieving 8 hours, and you only managed to achieve 4 hours, how reassured can we be that you are going to be able to get through all the work that is programmed, and that we're not going to be losing like the key controls audit work that needs to be done, and those areas that we see as specifically high risk, which you would get from the operational risk register, not the strategic one. And we need to know that sort of reassurance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I can completely understand with your concerns. In terms of the assurance mapping, as I stated, it's the nature of the piece of work. It's not a piece of work that we could necessarily wholeheartedly control in terms of the timing of when we could get responses back from everybody, not just within the council, but for the other councils as well, so that we could give a more valued opinion on anything that needed to be undertaken or considered as a risk to the council. So in pulling that together across 6 councils to make sure that we could use the information wholeheartedly and holistically to say that what we could include in the plan. What we didn't want to do was report and conclude on Broadlands, which we could have done a number of weeks before. to then say, actually, afterwards, actually, this has come to light at another organisation. We need to consider this here, and this is something we need to consider. So for us to do that across all of the organisations, it would always be quite challenging in terms of timing for that completion, because we're reliant on other organisations. That's the only audit in the plan of that nature. And as I say, we've actually reached conclusion on that now, and that will be concluded and very shortly. In terms of the other audits and delivery of the plan, as in previous years, we've always delivered within year. We've always delivered as we said we were going to. And in terms of, I say, Q3, where we've got payroll and HR already in progress, we've got council tax and an NDR, council tax and payroll and HR and council tax and NDR in progress. The other audits are already scheduled in. We've scheduled our resources and allocated them for the year. And we've also, we're looking to conclude on the field work of the last audit, end of February, early March. That gives us a 3-week leeway just in case there is anything comes up. We do have a lot of spare capacity in Q4 in terms of resources. We've done this intentionally because we don't know in pandemic whether there could be an impact in Q4 when it's the coldest weather. So what we are trying to do is make sure we have additional capacity across the firm should we need it to top up the local resource. So we do have plans in place. We have everything set up, ready to go. We have agreements with all the organisations of how we do data transfer. A lot of that work was done over the summer to make sure that we could hit the ground running when everybody was back up and running, ready to receive us. And we have had quite a number of auditors sitting there waiting, ready to come back on site. So in terms of resources, capacity and delivery, as I say, the caveat is we don't know what's around the corner. We never know what's going to hit us globally. So unless something particularly changes that, we are ready, we are set up, and we do have resources in place. So I don't think that we should have any particular concerns at this point for delivery of the plan.
Right. Well, thanks for that, Fiona. I do feel a lot more reassured. We are now in Q3, so yes, I would have expected that some of the work would have been started. When will you next be presenting a report on the progress of internal audit according to the plan?
So that will be at the next audit committee.
Not the November one,
not the
November. January.
Okay, yeah,
January.
That's what I wanted to clarify. Thank you. Right. Do any other members have any comments that they would like to make on the progress? I'm just going to quickly scan through and see if I see any hands up.
No one's indicating, Chairman.
Okay, right. So thank you very much for that. What is our goal or the recommendation? Members note the progress in delivering the internal audit plan work for the 2020. So thank you very much for that, Fiona. We have noted it. So we can then move on to the next agenda item, which is the follow-up report on internal audit, which is on page 28. And at this point, I would like to welcome our Managing Director, Trevor Holden. Thank you very much for being at our meeting. There's just going back to the minutes of our previous meeting, where it is in minute 45, the chairman emphasized that the recommendations should be taken seriously. And he expected to see the outstanding recommendations implemented by the next meeting of the committee in October. Also reported to the full council, the last council meeting, emphasized that the responsible officers were required to prepare a plan, present that plan to the managing director, and if those plans were not implemented and the audits were not completed, that we would be asking him to present the reasons why those recommendations have not been implemented. But before I hand over to Trevor, because when I looked at the report, I just saw red everywhere and extensions. And as I'm saying, we've got to the point now where extension after extension after extension after extension is just not satisfactory anymore, and we have to now get these issues resolved. I'm going to hand over to Fiona to present her report on the follow-up. So over to you,
Okay.
Fiona.
Thank you, Chairman. Absolutely. In terms of the follow-up, report and where we are on progress for implementing the recommendations, as you can see in the start of the report, we can show the breakdown of years of where the recommendations are outstanding, or with caveat of obviously the outstanding recommendations and overdue. It is pleasing to see that we only have 2 recommendations outstanding from earlier years. So there were the majority of the recommendations are for the year just past. Perhaps if we could direct you straight to Appendix 1, which shows you the breakdown of the recommendations that are outstanding and where they fall. And as you can see through there is a trend that the earlier recommendations have been implemented, and it's the more later ones that are outstanding. In terms of Appendix 2, we have the outstanding recommendations that have been extended. Each of these have been extended with reasons provided. In terms of the timetables for the revised due dates and the original due dates, we do acknowledge that management have stated when the recommendations are first made, when they believe that they can implement those recommendations. On one hand, it's good that management are very optimistic in terms of when they believe these recommendations could be implemented. But it is common practice sometimes where recommendations don't reach those dates. Sometimes if work hasn't been done, in this case, we can see with each of the recommendations that progress has been made on these. Some of them are nearing completion and not quite there as yet. I wasn't anticipating going into each recommendation in detail unless you have questions on them. But in terms of progress, there are a number of recommendations that are outstanding that still need to be implemented. But as I stated, we can see that there is progress. We've got new revised dates for implementation, and it's in discussion with management whether they feel it was realistic for the dates that they're moving the recommendations to. Perhaps in terms of the report, I could take any questions on any particular areas or any particular recommendations.
I was just looking at the first recommendation, which has to do with the purchase orders, and I would be intrigued to find out from internal audit how many times these recommendations have been given extensions, because at the last meeting we were told that the due date was going to be the 30th of September.
Chairman, would it be useful for me to come in at this stage? Would it be useful for me to come in at this stage and give you an update on where these are?
Okay, sorry, can I just carry on with the point that I was making with regard to the number of extensions that have been given on these things. The more recent ones I can understand and I can accept that they are very recent audits and that we are in a pandemic and therefore we can extend those. But again, as you say, they have to be a realistic extension. Would we be because of past performance and the history of these long outstanding recommendations, would we be in a position that maybe those extension dates are not realistic, that we could be looking at another 3 or 4 extensions before those are implemented. We need to know as a committee that if you as internal audit give a revised due date, that there is that commitment and that determination that you will be able to say after that or by that due date, we can close down this recommendation. And so that's my concern that I see time and time again, that we are internal audit are just, just extending all the time. And if officers see that happening, that they will then say, well, actually, it's not, I don't have to take it as seriously as I should, because internal audit will just give me another extension. And that's the concern that I have when I see extension upon extension upon extension being given for these implementation. So I know Trevor wants to come in. What I would like to say to Trevor is, firstly, if you can tell us that the officers did come to you with their plan of how they were going to implement it. And then if you could then explain where you are, why they have come forward with a further extension, and is there now a commitment to implement those recommendations as they are stated by the now further revised due date? So I'll present that to Trevor, and if you can take us through these overdue recommendations.
Chairman, thank you very much for inviting me to your committee today. Councillors, good morning to you too. In terms of the role of internal audit, absolutely it's recognised as critical in making sure we get our controls, processes and procedures bang on and right. And to give more credence to that, any outstanding recommendations will now appear on the quarterly business performance report and update to further raise the profile of areas of concern raised by internal audit, to make sure that the responsible officers are managing those audit recommendations, and where corrective action needs to be taken, taking the corrective action, or indeed challenging the audit recommendation if there's something that's not quite right, or as Fiona's already raised, there's a system that's coming into a place to address something. But please do take my assurance that the role of internal audit is both valued and taken seriously, and that recommendations will be addressed and will be addressed in a timely fashion and appropriate feedback given to the audit committee. Can I also, Chairman, thank you for raising the profile and your committee for raising the profile of this issue, such that actually things are more in the focus and will be addressed in a timely fashion, except where we are in COVID. And some of the recommendations that may come forward in the future, depending on the materiality of those, may be interrupted by that process, or may be interrupted by the process of the introduction of new IT systems and the like. But even where that happens, it's really important that we demonstrate to you as an audit committee that we're alive to the issue, mitigations are in place, and that we give you realistic timescales on when something might be addressed. So first off, internal audit, absolutely taken seriously. The role of the audit committee is recognised. We appreciate your endeavour and for raising the profile of the issues we have in front of us this morning. In terms of your particular question around have the responsible officers addressed the issues or raised plans with me to address these issues, hopefully I can work through the outstanding recommendations and satisfy you that we are absolutely on the case and that things are either addressed or are in the process for being addressed. Chairman, if you're comfortable, I propose to just work through those recommendations one by one and maybe pause for any questions after I've given you a response on each, if you're comfortable with that approach, Chairman. You're on mute, but I think you said okay. Yeah, good, right. So the first one is BRD 1809. And this is concerning the control of purchase orders and the like. So as the report
Sorry,
says,
can I just pause you there? I've got somebody at the door.
Yeah, of course.
And I've got a dog barking now because of that. So
yep.
Sounds like somebody has come down to sort that out. So please go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was on a call earlier, and one of the speakers from government said, "I think my dog's just eating the postman. Can I just pause?" I'm not sure on the ratio in size between your dog and the postman. So BRD 1809, that first recommendation. When I read that, Chairman, I think with your indulgence, this recommendation can and should be closed, because I think the response is demonstrating that there is a system in place where there is a breach, that action is taken. So do we have an appropriate system in place? Yes. Where there is a breach, is the breach investigated and being addressed? Yes. Will we stop individuals or some set of circumstances causing something to step out of line? Probably not, because there may be good reason for that to happen. But are we aware, and are the appropriate control measures in place? I think they are. And the evidence that I can see, and hopefully you can see in the response you've got there, demonstrates that. So with your forbearance, I would suggest that this recommendation, which predates my arrival in the authority, probably could with a degree of confidence be closed now, even if as a committee you asked to see where there is transgression, and so you were able to keep on top of this particular issue, or if internal audit actually furnished within their report to say, actually there's been the following number of errors, to continue to give you that assurance for a period of time that we do have a system in place, and where there is transgression or where there's a reason for stepping outside of the system is audited and we're aware of those reasons, demonstrating appropriate controls. Chairman, shall I pause there on that first one?
Yes, that's great. Thanks. There's just a couple of points on that. Firstly, it's not us, the committee, that closes down an audit recommendation. That is done by the Internal Audit Service. So with them being able to close it, they need to be satisfied that the control measures are in place. And secondly, that if they are satisfied with what is on paper, they need to make sure that they have the evidence to substantiate what is being said as part of that closing down process. When I looked at the response with regards to that recommendation, the recommendation says, in addition, all purchase orders to be raised prior to the purchase and independently authorized by a manager. I did query this with Rodney yesterday, and he indicated that it's not just managers, it is team leaders, and whether this is acceptable as an independent manager, that needs to be. I need to have the reassurance from the Internal Audit Service that that is acceptable as far as that aspect of the authorization is concerned. Because it does mention that purchase order limits and authorizers are being reviewed at CMLT, and that has been done. But whether that is acceptable as independently authorized by a manager, whether it is at the management level that needs to be authorized, or whether they are satisfied that team leader intervention is sufficiently addressing what they have recommended. that's the first one on that. And then it goes on to say reports will now be run weekly to pick up any issues quickly. And that is, to me, that is an excellent thing to be doing. But that was talking about whether the purchase was authorized, was raised prior to the purchase being made. The purchase order was raised. And what I would be looking at is when you draw those reports, will you be looking at the being prior to the purchase being made, and that they are appropriately, or so the two control measures that are in that recommendation are checked on a weekly basis as well.
Hi.
Okay, Fiona?
Perhaps if I could comment on that, Chairman. Absolutely, in terms of team leader, if it's set up in an appropriate way so that it's the appropriate team leader for signing off that purchase order within the authorisation limits. Also, in terms of the weekly checks, obviously it's an excellent check. What I perhaps would suggest in this case, obviously we would need just to do some verification for us to be able to close that down. To then close that recommendation down, we do have our key controls audit coming up in Q4. We have been evolving over the last couple of years our data analytics on purchases and some of the systems. So what we are intending to do this year, as long as we can get the right data sets out of the system, is to do data analytics on the full population. This would include things like it would be able to identify all throughout the year any invoices, any that haven't been raised without a purchase order, and we can then extrapolate that data and work down, is there a reason why? So would it be because it's a utility bill and they won't have a purchase order, so they're genuine ones, or ones that shouldn't have slipped through, and perhaps look into why. So I think this does give us the opportunity to be able to verify this one, close this down, and then we can revisit in the key controls audit to see whether that the controls have worked and it's no longer an issue. But we do have measures in place using our data analytics that we can cover the whole period.
Super. So then my question is going to be, you've given it a revised due date that it's the end of this month. So will it be closed down by the end of this month? Or are you still, because it's now, you're going to be doing the verification work after that date, is that due date, the revised due date, is that now going to be shown as still open when we have a next audit committee meeting? And again, my question is, how realistic is that revised due date?
Absolutely.
If you're not able to close it down before that date.
Yeah, absolutely. I think within this case, we can do some verification work now to enable us to have that closed down now. Sorry, Emma.
Yeah, I was just going to add as well, Chairman, just for the committee, as we discussed yesterday, this was one that management had liaised with internal audit about closing down, and we talked through that would be what we would like to do, and internal audit had agreed that. But because we know that this had a lot of focus from the audit committee, it was felt that it was prudent to bring this update to you so that you were comfortable and could see the management action that had been taken. So sorry to cut across, Fiona, but I think you know, that is achievable and that can be done.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. I think we can, we're in a position that we can verify close down now. And I think where I'm coming from and revisiting it will be, it's a key control. It's one of the control, or it's something we would include in the key controls. So we can actually do a full population test at the end of the year. So if there was to be any more issues arising that when one-off incidents or something that we could see there was a breakdown in controls, we would be able to pick it up then. So I'd be quite comfortable with closing it down.
Okay, that's very good news. So it won't be on the next as an outstanding one.
Well, that will be part of the normal assurance process. So Fiona, thank you for that. The next two, Chairman, I'm not quite sure why they're in front of the committee. because they actually relate to a wholly owned, or not a wholly owned, a jointly owned private company. But that won't stop me explaining where we are with those two recommendations. I would welcome a conversation separately with internal audit to say, actually, I think these probably should have been presented to the company board rather than to the audit committee. But they're very valid audit observations and they need to be addressed. So where are we on 2001, BRD 2001, in terms of policies and practices? So if I can just explain for, just for clarity, what Broadland Growth Limited is. Broadland Growth Limited is a joint venture between Broadland Council and the Norse Group, which is a company for building properties, residential properties. It doesn't actually employ any people. The people who work for the company are seconded in from the respective agencies. And so those employees are subject to the policy practices of their organisation. So, for example, people coming from the one team would be subject to the one team conditions around those things. But the audit recommendations were considered by the board, which is a joint board with directors from Broadland Council and directors from the Norse Group. They were taken on board and accepted, and the company is looking to adopt the appropriate policies of either Broadland Council or the Norse Group, so that actually it can adopt the most appropriate policies, and that they then will continue to be updated consistent with what the donor organisation does with those policies, because the company itself doesn't employ any people, and it would be an administrative folly to say, well, actually, we'll prescribe all of our own policies and then have to update them when the people are actually employed by the donor bodies. So those policies are under review and they will be picked up, and the view is that they will adopt either Broadland's or Norse's programmes. That then leads on and follows on to the next one, which was around resilience of the company. And it would be wrong of me to kind of go into the detail of the company business in open forum, because it is a private company. But the company is looking to increase its staffing levels to provide more resilience in the company as the business of the company starts to accelerate and grow. So with your forbearance, Chairman, I would like to have a discussion around where these two sit and make sure that they're reflected in the right place, which I think is the board of the private company. But I absolutely can give you assurance as a board that those recommendations are being taken seriously by the board of the company, and they are being addressed, both in terms of resilience, looking to recruit a full-time person employed by one of the bodies, as I said, rather than the company, and the making sure that we've adopted the right policies where we need to do so, bearing in mind the fact that we don't employ anybody in the company. I hope that's helpful, but I'm happy to take any questions, Jen.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Emma, if my memory serves me correct, you would have been head of internal audit at the time that this audit was initiated, and maybe you can comment on why it is in our follow-up register.
Oh, must you going to test my memory, Chairman, are you? Okay, let me scratch my head a second and bear a bit of time. No, in all seriousness, so this was something that's put in. It's quite common to put in, but I think Trevor makes a good point in terms of where do we report the recommendations through to, and it's right, it's the company that is responsible for implementing them, absolutely. The reason company audits are put into audit plans is because quite often there's a financial input from the council, and there's the requirement to provide some assurance over the governance of those companies to make sure that they're working in the way that the council would expect them to do, and to ensure that the money that they've invested is being used appropriately. But having said that, you know, Trevor's right, those recommendations sit well and truly with the company to do. So it's about working through the output of that. Obviously, as an audit committee, you would want to understand the output of that because it's an audit that had been requested to go in. But it's about how we then respond through and deal with those actions, because some of those actions, depending on the setup of the company, we would be able to recommend them, but we would have no influence over them. It would then be for the company to take those forward. So it's probably worth just thinking how we manage that through. But that was the reason for that being in the plan in the first instance.
Thank you, Emma. Trevor?
Chairman, if I could suggest that that would feature as part of the company's own audit return and its end of year statement. So would the partners or the shareholders of the company, Broadland Council and the Norse Group, have sight of any audit recommendations and whether there was anything outstanding? They would in the annual report.
Excellent. So that will be a liaison between yourself and Internal Audit Service.
Chairman, thank you.
Councillor Sue Holland had a hand raised.
Yes, over to Sue.
Yeah, I think I was just on, I see that it was going to be in the report, and I get that it's a private company, but I do feel that as Broadland is a shareholder effectively of that company, then there must be some come back to us so that we understand what measures are being taken to make sure that audits are correct. So I think Trevor sort of answered that by saying it would be in the annual report. But could you correct me if I'm wrong on
that? Chairman, yes. So companies of the size of Broadland Growth are not absolutely required to have an AGM and produce an annual report, but it would be good practice so to do. And audit, there is of course an end of year audit return where the auditor, which is not Broadland Council, where the commercial auditor is required to submit their audit letter, which will pick up those audit recommendations. I do think it is good practice for the shareholder to have a report, an annual report, and to be able to ask the company anything around that report to assure itself as a shareholder. So I absolutely accept the point. I guess the nuts and bolts of dealing with it probably sit in another place. They sit with the board of Broadland Growth. But should you absolutely see assurance that there are no audit observations that would cause you concern as a shareholder on an annual basis, then that absolutely is appropriate for you to do that. And we need to get that right in governance terms.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Sue. Just to expand a little bit on that point and what Emma has said, when you're referring to an audit report that is prepared for the limited company, that is a person who is external to the company that will go and look at the accounts and present their auditor's report. Similarly, at the local authority, we have an external auditor in the form of, Ernst Young, who come in and do our audit and give us a report. What I'm understanding as to what has happened with it being audited, it's being internally audited. And I'm not aware of, because you don't have any staff, of whether they have an internal audit service which is looking at the control measures that are in place in their company, and whether this was, I don't know whether it was at the request of the company that they have some kind of internal audit service work done for the company, and it was I don't know whether it was paid for by the council because we needed to get that assurance. So there is that distinction that needs to be made between an internal audit service and an external audit service.
Yeah, absolutely recognise that. And what there is an agreement between the company and different parts. So, for example, some of the financial services are provided under an SLA with Norse Group, and they're just paid for. And the same in terms of internal audit. what my challenge was, actually the internal audit report should have found its way to the board, not to Broadland Council's audit committee. But we draw in whether that's HR services, whether that's financial services, etc., from one of the shareholder organisations. Some things are external, so as you rightly say, you know, the finance is an external provision. The auditor, the external auditor, is an external provision. But that's how the company operates, leaning on the shareholder organisations for a fee for service, but without actually employing people directly into the company. But I absolutely pick up the point around the need to make sure that you have sight of an annual report, and that in that report it refers to in any outstanding internal audit recommendations, and that would be right and proper that you ask for that as a shareholder.
Absolutely fine.
Or that the council
Trevor.
asks for that as a shareholder.
Yeah.
Good. Can I move on, Chairman?
Absolutely.
Good. So BRD 2003 is maybe going to be less of a satisfactory answer for you, but it comes in, there's several facets to that request. So one, are the reconciliations being done? Yes. Are they up to date? No. Has additional resource been procured to make sure that they are brought up to date and that the process is simplified? Yes, absolutely. And are those recommendations, when they are complete, being signed off by a separate officer? Yes, they absolutely are. And so that's why there's a revised date, and we would anticipate the reconciliations being up to date by the end of November, although actually we're trying to get that done earlier if we can. And I think the final point was around training, and staff are being trained on bringing the reconciliations up to date, and to make sure that we're doing that in the least cumbersome way that we possibly can. So work in progress, confidence on the revised date. This is a really important internal audit recommendation that this control measure is absolutely up to date and right and proper, that we are focusing on it. The date will stand and it will be done consistent with the plan that I've been provided with, Chairman.
Thank you, Trevor. Yes, when we're talking about reconciliations, technology has moved a long way since, and I did ask the question when we were looking at the draft annual accounts of whether they, because South Norfolk use one system and Broadland use a different system, whether these systems are capable of producing the kind of reports that at the push of a button you can get the reconciliation, or if you work on instead of having to pull everything out onto an Excel spreadsheet, and then you've got to work through spreadsheets to get to something to reconcile. Surely the system is should be capable, or maybe it needs to be upgraded or updated so that you don't have to keep working on and acquire additional resources to do this kind of reconciliation work. So that's just a comment that I wanted.
Chairman, thank you. I'm sure you and I are probably both of an age where we were used to manual reconciliations when we were running finance departments, and the nonsense that created at the end of a month for probably a week or so to get it right on big accounts. Rodney will know better about the systems than I do. So is it okay, Chairman, if we bring Rodney in?
Yes.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think that is one of the issues we've got with the BDC reconciliations. They are still far too manual and the system is not helping us deliver these. So this will be one of the considerations we will take into account when we look at our financial systems. And it could be that we end up deciding that the current system for BDC does need to be replaced with a more modern system. So it is something we need to be looking at. The reconciliations at South Norfolk are a lot easier than the Broadland ones. So I think it's fair to say we may well be looking at the BDC financial system before too long.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Rodney. Anybody else got any questions or comments? Don't see any hands going up. So back to you,
Chair. Good. Can I move on to BRD 2006 to do with homelessness? And I would suggest, Chairman, that this action should be closed because we do have appropriate assurance from those people that we contract directly with. There's always going to be the need for spot purchase, and where there is a need for a spot purchase, we will do our best to make sure that we've got the right assurances in place. But in terms of the recommendation, I am reliably told that it has been satisfied and can now be closed. And I think that conversation has happened already with internal audit. Fiona, I don't know if you can assure us of that.
Absolutely. In terms of the discussions, those discussions haven't happened with myself directly. So I can look into how we can close these down on that basis.
Okay, that's excellent to hear. So that data of the 30th of November, we won't see it on the next one.
No, Chair.
We have that. Okay. BRD 2010.
2010. Yeah. So this is, I'm going to say this is work in progress. There are ongoing, Rodney, you might be able to help with this, ongoing discussions with the finance team, but it's been delayed due to remote work. I don't know if there's anything that colleagues in the room can add. This is probably the least satisfactory answer I'm going to present to you today, Chairman.
Comments? Debbie?
There has been some work on this. So the monthly reconciliation is taking place. It's the signing and dating by the preparer and the reviewer. And I think some of this is because we're now trying to do this via an electronic way, whereas when people used to be in the office. So it's about process around that. And that's the bit that we've got to resolve. But the reconciliations themselves, I understand, are being done. It's the sign-off process that we're still just considering how that is going to be done in the most efficient manner. So work has definitely been done on this recommendation. It's just finalising the last few bits and pieces. Obviously, the most important bit really that they've been signed off by somebody has been completed and then signed off by the reviewer independently.
And Fiona, what are your comments with regards to signing off something electronically rather than because you don't know who's sitting behind a computer?
Absolutely. I think this is a discussion that I need to have with Debbie to see how this can be achieved. I wouldn't want them to have to print things off just for it to be signed. I don't think in how we're moving forward that's the right thing to do. But we would just need to look at what processes they could have in place for electronic sign-off. And perhaps that's a discussion I can have offline with Debbie to see how that could be achieved. Because I wholeheartedly agree. There's no point in printing something off just for the sake of signing it. But then there will be an electronic solution. We just need to agree what that would look like.
Just another point on that particular one. It's the responsible officer is a team leader. Is that a sufficiently high enough level for this to be dealt with, or should it be escalated further up?
Again, this is I think in terms of who this team leader is, what their role is, what segregation of duties they have in terms of the systems and what their responsibilities are. So defining what team leader actually states and what actually means. I think that, again, that sort of needs to be explored a bit more, just to make sure that if they are of the appropriate seniority to sign it off. Some organisations they are, some they're not. So I just need to have those, again, conversations about exactly what their role is to be able to see that that's appropriate.
Right, so we will have that one hopefully sorted out by the 31st of December.
Yes, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, then we go to BRD 2011.
Yep. So more positive, Chairman. I can confirm that there is an appropriate disaster recovery plan in place. With regard to the particular aspect of power, there is alternative power source. It is tested on a routine basis. Equally, our resilience has improved over COVID with the use of soft phones, so we're less reliant on some of the things that we were reliant on previously. And again, I would suggest that this recommendation has been satisfied and should be closed. There's probably the ongoing process of our resilience and disaster recovery, particularly in the climate that we are operating in, and the very, very different circumstances in which we're operating, has probably fundamentally shifted the risk around disaster recovery, which was fundamentally historically focused around the building and maintaining building and systems in the building. I'd suggest this probably should feature again on an internal audit, just to make sure that we're operating in the best possible way in the new environment. But this recommendation, as it stands, I believe has been satisfied and should be closed down. Thanks, Chairman.
Absolutely, this is something that we can now look to verify and hopefully close down so that it doesn't feature on the next follow-up.
Super, so we won't expect to see an extension to that one. Trevor, I just want to say thank you very much for your feedback, for your responses. It has been extremely helpful, and I look forward to our next follow-up report having a green slant to it rather than a red slant to it.
Chairman, if I can, in closing and retiring from your committee, just thank you for raising these issues, for the excellent work that internal audit are doing to help us to stay compliant, to keep our control measures in place, particularly in the fragmented way in which we're working whilst we go through the COVID pandemic. The control measures and the audit of those control measures absolutely becomes more and more important when you're working in a remote environment. So thank you, Chairman, for your invitation to committee this morning, and I look forward to coming back under a series of greens that you would look for. Thanks, Chairman.
Super. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Right. I think that concludes everything except the the annual governance statement, which is now over to Emma.
Thank you, Chairman. So hopefully, committee, this will be nice and brief, because I'm sure you'd all like to go and have some lunch. So what you've got before you, if you recall, I brought the annual governance statement last time round, and this is just updated as you've requested. So I'm just going to let you know there were 4 changes that the committee requested to be made. So on page 47 of your agenda, at the top there, we talked about members can take on all aspects of their role confidently and legally. We changed that to confidently. It had said confidentially, so we changed that one for you there. On the top of page 48, we had a duplicate limited, so I've taken one of the limiteds out of there for you. On page, I think it's 51, let me just check. Yeah, page 51, we added in the COVID legislation as the committee had requested us to do so. And then finally on page 52, where we were talking about training on risk for staff, we added in that members would be provided with that training as well. So looking back on the discussions, that was all the updates that you had asked for on the annual governance statement. And hopefully you can sign that off to go into the final statement of accounts.
Absolutely. Anybody got any comments they want to add into that? Absolutely spot on. So thank you for that, Emma. We now need to do a final endorsement, I suspect, to approve the final annual governance statement for 2019-20. We do this, do it by show of hands and comment by Councillor King. So all those who are in favour, thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you. So, Leah, is that unanimous?
That's unanimous.
That was unanimous, yeah.
Super. Thank you very much for that. Now we go on to the last agenda item, which is the Audit Committee work program. And is this James, or is this Emma, or is this who is this?
Open to the committee chairman, just to make sure you're happy with the items that are forthcoming. Just one thing that we will start doing for you as a committee is quite a lot of your items are standard rolling items, and we will start to do you a rolling annual look forward on your work programme, so you can see a fuller picture of everything that's coming through to the committee, just so that you've got that wider picture for you, chairman, and then we can add in bits and pieces as they arise through the year.
Okay. For the 26th of November, is that when we're going to have another look at the draft strategic risk register?
That is, chairman. If we can, we will add that into the work programme for you.
Okay. I'm also aware that in the papers that went to cabinet and then council, it indicated that we were going to look at this 3 times a year. Which means that we will have to already start looking at it at our January. I don't know. We don't have a January meeting.
We don't have a January meeting this year. What we'll do, chairman, because we're starting to look at, believe it or not, in October, the next year's calendar of meetings, so we can get those sorted. And what we'll do is make sure that we link those in with, so that you're getting the strategic risk register at the right time, so that it complements when it goes through to cabinet. But you are correct. Yep, you will be receiving that 3 times over the course of the financial year.
Okay. So it probably will be included on the March meeting that we have in this calendar.
Yes, it will probably. Can I take that away and double check? I don't want to commit to something when it's not mine. Can I take that away, chairman? Is that okay?
Okay, that's fine. Right. Anybody else got any things that they want to have considered for our work program? I don't see any hands going. Sue. Right, Sue.
Yeah, it wasn't something extra to be considered. It was the fraud policies review. Have I missed have we got any indication of where we might be with that?
That's the fraud policies, yes. I understood from what was said earlier that this person is now in post and is working on one of our policies.
Thank you.
How soon would that be able to come to committee for us to have a good look at it? Thanks, Rodney.
That's one of the things about being on sort of remote working. During this meeting, I've just been able to actually speak to the relevant person by email, and they've just sent me the new draft policy. So it's actually with me now. So actually, I can probably even get it to the next meeting or the one after that. So it is ready, drafted, ready to come just for my sign off. So if you wanted, I could aim for the next meeting, or if not, the one after that.
Right, because our work program just says we've got a 26th of November meeting and an 11th of March. If it was to come to the 11th of March meeting, we would have more than just the one policy coming forward. Is that correct, Rodney?
No, I think the main one that will be coming forward at the moment would be the anti-fraud policy. There might be other ones coming later, but that's the prime policy that I would be bringing to this committee.
Right, is because I'm just wondering about any anti-money laundering, whether we have a whistleblowing policy, whether that's looked at by this committee.
Chairman, did you want me to come in there? Because these are ones that kind of cross between me and Rodney, between the two of us. So we've divvied them up. So Rodney's got the fraud policy, I get whistleblowing, and between us we'll pull together anti-money laundering. So what I'll do, if it's okay, Chairman, I'll just take away that with Rodney offline, with the ambition of getting those 3 together, because they are very complementary, with the ambition of getting those 3 to you in March, if that's okay.
Absolutely fine, yeah. Okay, so that basically concludes the meeting. So thank you everyone for your participation, and thank you to Fiona for coming to our meeting. And we will see you possibly at another meeting before Faye returns, or not.
Our Faye is back in January, Chairman, so she will be here with you in March.
Yes, she will be here, but she won't be coming to our meeting in November.
Oh, the November one.
No.
I don't know if Fiona will actually, Chairman, because it's just external audit reports at your meeting in November.
And we're looking at the strategic risk register.
Yeah, correct.
As well. So that's okay. So Fiona, it was lovely to see you there. Thank you very much for coming.